Okay, diving right in today. You sent us this research paper, super interesting, by David F. Felden, The Implications of Research on Expertise for Curriculum and Pedagogy. It really got us thinking, when we want to learn something, we naturally turn to the experts, the people who are at the top of their game. Makes sense, right?
Right.
But this paper asks a really interesting question. Can we always trust that the best performers are also the best at explaining how they do what they do, especially when they're trying to teach those skills to someone else?
Yeah, that's the big question we're going to try to unpack in this deep dive. I mean, this paper brings together a ton of research on how experts' minds actually work, how well they can describe their own thinking, and then ultimately how effective teaching is when it's based on what they tell us. It's kind of like we're getting a sneak peek behind the curtain to see what makes an expert tick. And that sneak peek is super valuable if you are trying to learn from them.
Absolutely. So the paper starts with something that seems really basic, but when you dig into it, it's actually surprisingly complex.
Yeah.
What does it even mean to be an expert? Like, how do we even define that? It points out that there's this ongoing debate, right? Some folks define an expert as someone who consistently performs at a super high level, like they're always hitting those top scores.
Yeah.
But other people look at their broader abilities, how well they can handle real-world situations where things aren't always so neat and tidy.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that how psychologists think about expertise isn't always how someone in a professional setting might think about it. Like, someone making a hiring decision might look at a person's track record, what they've accomplished, their reputation in the field, or even just how many years they've been doing something. So the research in this paper, it actually includes people who fit all these different definitions of expert. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
So right off the bat, you're already getting this idea that expert isn't so simple.
Right, it's more nuanced, more than meets the eye.
It's more than just like a label you slap on someone.
Exactly.
There are different ways to think about it, depending on what you're looking at, what you're trying to understand.
For sure.
Okay, so we've got this complex definition of what an expert is. The paper then goes on to explore how experts actually think. It references some really classic work by Glaser and Chi from way back in 1988. They laid out some of the common characteristics of expert thinking.
Oh yeah, Glaser and Chi, that's a foundational paper, really important. What they found, is that experts within their specific area, they see patterns and connections that novices just totally miss.
Right.
It's like, think about a seasoned musician hearing a chord progression. They'll instantly understand how complex it is, where it might be going next. Meanwhile, someone who's just starting out, they're just hearing a bunch of notes.
It's all just noise.
Exactly. And experts are also much faster and more accurate in their domain. They have a better memory for the important stuff. They approach problems at a much deeper, more fundamental level. Plus, they spend more time up front really analyzing the problem before jumping in, and they're really good at checking their own work as they go along, catching mistakes.
So it's like they've got this whole different way of seeing the world within their area of expertise.
Absolutely.
And that lets them do things so much faster, more accurately, more efficiently. And then the paper brings in Erickson's work on deliberate practice, this idea that it takes like at least 10 years, usually more, of really intense focused effort to reach those elite levels of expertise.
Yep. At least 10 years is kind of the rule of thumb.
They use chess masters as one of the classic examples, right?
Right.
Often needing that huge amount of dedicated practice to really master the game.
Yeah, and Erickson and his colleagues, they really emphasize that it's not just about putting in the hours. It's got to be the right kind of practice. It has to be targeted training with specific goals. You need feedback to correct those errors, and you need a real commitment to constantly improving. And they introduced this really interesting idea called maximal adaptation to task constraints.
Okay, I love that phrase. Break that down for us a little bit. What does maximal adaptation to task constraints actually mean for someone who's trying to understand expertise?
Okay, so think of it like this. In any field, there are going to be rules and limitations. In chess, it's the rules of the game, how the pieces move, the strategies,
Right.
For a surgeon, it's the anatomy of the human body. You can't just go in there and start rearranging things. You have to work within those constraints.
Yeah.
So what experts do is they become so incredibly attuned to these rules and limitations that their performance becomes perfectly optimized within them. They're not fighting those constraints. They're using them to their advantage. Finding the absolute most efficient and effective ways to operate within those boundaries. So the key insight here, the thing to really understand, is that becoming an expert isn't just about getting more and more knowledge. It's about fundamentally changing the way you think within the specific rules and limitations of your field.
It's like becoming one with those constraints.
Exactly.
Not just knowing a bunch of stuff, but being able to apply it in that specific context. It's like that saying, you don't just want to know the notes, you want to understand the music.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this idea that experts think differently. They've got this deep understanding of the rules and constraints. Let's talk about the role of knowledge itself. The paper goes back to that classic chess study by Chase and Simon, which showed that experts had way better recall for realistic game positions, but not for random arrangements of pieces.
Right. It all goes back to context.
So what does that tell us about the nature of expertise?
Well, that study really highlights the importance of knowledge that's specific to the domain. Like the expert's advantage in memory, it just disappeared when the positions didn't make sense. They weren't like real game scenarios. It wasn't knowledge they could apply. This tells us that their superior recall wasn't just about having a better general memory. It was all tied into their experience. They were recognizing familiar and meaningful patterns. Like, imagine a bird watcher instantly recognizing a rare bird in a split second.
Wow. Yeah.
It's their specific knowledge, their deep familiarity with those birds that makes that possible. They've internalized those patterns.
And it's not just about how much knowledge they have.
Right.
The paper then gets into the quality of that knowledge, how it's structured. They mention that classic study by Chi, Feldovich, and Glaser, looking at how physics students categorize problems. Experts group problems together based on deep, underlying principles, like the conservation of energy. But beginners, they tend to focus on surface-level similarities. Like, oh, these both have inclined planes, so they must be similar problems.
Yeah, the way their knowledge is organized is totally different. Experts have these really elaborate mental frameworks. We call them schemas. They organize their knowledge in a way that's much more interconnected and driven by those core principles. So they're not just memorizing a bunch of facts. They're building these mental models of how things work. This lets them understand problems at a deeper level, see the core issue, and not get distracted by surface details.
It's like they're seeing the forest, not just the trees.
Exactly. And the paper even mentions a study where chess experts' memory for specific piece locations was even better when they were given some conceptual information beforehand, like
Right.
a little description of the strategic situation. It's like that abstract understanding gives them a framework for remembering the concrete details. It's all connected.
Wow, so the way they structure and access that knowledge is a huge part of what makes them experts.
Absolutely. It's not just about what you know, it's how you know it.
Okay, so we've got experts who think differently, they organize their knowledge differently. Now, how about how they actually approach solving problems? What's their strategy like? The paper delves into this too. It says that experts tend to use forward reasoning based on their deep understanding, working deductively from first principles.
Right. Because their knowledge is so well organized and principle-driven, they can start with those principles and the information they're given and logically figure out the most effective strategy. It's like they're using those mental models to map out the optimal path to the solution.
Whereas novices, they often do the exact opposite. They try to reason backward from the solution they want, maybe using those surface level classifications we talked about and a lot of trial and error.
Exactly. They see the end goal and they're trying to work backward to figure out how to get there. Often they're grabbing for formulas or techniques that seem like they might fit, but they don't necessarily understand why those things work or if they're the best approach. And even when you tell novices, hey, take some time to plan out your approach, their strategies still don't look anything like what experts do. It shows there's a fundamental difference there. It's not just that they have less experience, it's a different cognitive starting point.
It's like they're playing the game on a different difficulty level.
Right. They're not even seeing the same board.
Wow. Okay, so we're starting to get this picture of expertise. It's not just about having more of something, it's about having different, more efficient processes. The next piece of the puzzle the paper talks about is working memory. It suggests that experts can handle more information in their working memory, especially information that's relevant to their domain. Does that mean their brains are just wired differently, like they have some
Yeah.
kind of special capacity?
It's not necessarily about having a bigger working memory overall. It's more about how they use it. Think of it like this. Experts have developed really effective ways to expand their working memory specifically for their area of expertise. Like they've got these super efficient filing systems in their brains. They're accessing all this information from long-term memory, bringing it into their working memory when they need it.
Totally true.
And this lets them hold and manipulate much more information in their mind than someone whose files are scattered and disorganized.
The example with the pilots is so interesting here. They performed way better when the instrument readings were what they expected to see, but when the information was weird or contradictory, they lost that advantage.
Exactly. That's because their expanded working memory, it's not just about being able to hold more random bits of information. It's all tied into those schemas we talked about, those mental models. When the new information fits neatly into those existing frameworks, they can process it super efficiently.
Oh, okay.
But when it clashes with their expectations, then they lose that advantage. They have to rely more on their general short-term memory, which is more limited.
Like they have to switch back to the default settings.
Yeah, exactly. They're back to square one. So it's really important to understand that this working memory advantage that experts have, it's usually very specific to their area of expertise. And it's built up through years and years of experience of building those schemas and practicing those skills.
Okay, so another piece of the puzzle. Experts are not just smarter, they're differently smart. They've got these specialized mental tools that let them process information more efficiently. So this brings us to another really crucial element of expertise that the paper discusses, and that's skill automaticity.
Right. Automaticity.
This is where a skill becomes so practiced, so ingrained, that you can do it almost effortlessly without even thinking about it. Like once you learn to ride a bike, you don't have to consciously think, okay, now push down on the right pedal, now shift your weight, now adjust the handlebars. It just happens.
Right. It becomes second nature. The paper explains that this happens through repeated connections between a stimulus and a response, so you're not constantly making conscious decisions. And these automated procedures, they become so deeply ingrained that they can even influence our judgments, how we set goals, without us even realizing it.
And the paper brings up a really interesting debate here about the role of automaticity in expertise. It references Erickson's argument that sometimes developing too much automaticity might actually hinder further development, especially the ability to adapt to new or unusual situations.
Yeah, that's a really key point. Erickson argued that real mastery involves being able to handle anything that comes your way, the unexpected stuff, the curveballs. And that requires conscious control and the ability to adjust on the fly. He worried that if skills get too automatic, you might lose that flexibility. However, the paper also presents a slightly different perspective on this by making a distinction between what they call routine expertise and adaptive expertise.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So routine expertise would be being really good at something in a stable, predictable environment.
Where those automatic skills are perfectly suited. Like a factory worker on an assembly line doing the same task perfectly for years. They're super efficient, but maybe they'd struggle if something changed. Exactly. They're masters of their routine. And there's that bridge playing study the paper mentions, which is a great example. Experts in bridge actually struggled more than novices when the fundamental rules of the game were changed, even though they could adapt just fine to small changes within the normal rules. It's like those highly automated processes couldn't handle a change to the core structure.
Interesting.
But then the paper contrasts this with the example of electronics troubleshooting, where some experts could adapt to those new weird problems while others couldn't. It suggests that adaptive expertise is also a real thing, you know?
So it's like some experts can break free from their routines when they need to.
Exactly.
And it seems like the ability to adapt really depends on the quality of their knowledge, how flexible their understanding is, and where those points of conscious decision-making are within their skill set. The paper talks about expert historians analyzing unfamiliar historical documents. The historian with a broader, more flexible understanding of the context could adapt much more easily to new information.
Absolutely. And the music example, the sight reading example is great too. Expert musicians, they rely heavily on those automatic skills for familiar musical patterns, but they can also consciously engage, problem solve when they encounter something new or really complex. So it's like a balancing act. Like the data from those air traffic controllers, it suggests that the automaticity of the basic skills is actually what drives their overall performance. But they also need to be able to adapt to unpredictable situations, right? So the key takeaway here is that automaticity is super powerful for efficiency, but it has to be balanced with conscious awareness, the ability to take control when you need to so you can adapt and keep growing.
Okay, so we've been talking about all these amazing things that experts can do, how they think, how they solve problems. But this brings us to a really crucial question that the paper tackles head on. How accurate are experts when they try to explain what they're doing? If their thinking is so automatic, their knowledge is structured in such a specific way, a lot of it's unconscious. Can they really articulate it all to someone else?
Yeah, and that's the million-dollar question. Early research, even looking at pretty simple tasks, found that as someone becomes more skilled, they actually tend to make more errors when they're trying to explain what they're doing. And the paper says this is partly because of the difference between what we call procedural knowledge, knowing how to do something, and declarative knowledge, which is knowing that something is the case, and being able to put it into words. Just because you can do something flawlessly doesn't mean you can break it down step by step for someone else.
Right, like try explaining to someone exactly how you keep your balance when you walk.
Exactly. You just do it.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, you don't think about it. But explaining all the tiny muscle movements and adjustments, good luck with that. And the paper goes deeper, breaking down specific areas where experts tend to be inaccurate in their self-reports. One of the big ones is how they explain the outcomes of their performance. They often attribute their actions to conscious decisions, even when a lot of what they're doing is actually driven by those automatic behaviors we were just talking about. That classic insight problem study where people solved a puzzle because of a subtle clue they weren't even aware of is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic. They thought they had this aha moment, a flash of insight.
But they were being nudged along without even realizing it.
And for experts, this tendency to explain their success as being all about their brilliant, conscious decisions, that seems to be even stronger. The paper talks about examples from medical diagnosis and neuropsychology where experts' decisions didn't always line up with their stated beliefs about what was influencing them. Like, deep down, they were operating on a level that they couldn't fully explain.
It's like their intuition was leading them in the right direction, but they couldn't quite articulate why.
Right.
Another area where self-reporting can be tricky is how experts assess the problems themselves. They're well-developed schemas, they're super helpful for solving problems.
Right, those mental models, those frameworks.
But they can also actually filter their perception and memory, make them miss details that don't fit their existing mental models.
Yeah.
There was that study where non-experts didn't even remember information that wasn't relevant to their problem-solving approach, which wasn't very effective, by the way.
Yeah, that's fascinating, right? Their mental models, they're like blinders in a way.
Yeah, it's like they're only seeing what they expect to see.
And the research on implicit learning really backs that up. People got better at tasks with these subtle patterns, but they couldn't say how. They were unconsciously picking up on those patterns. And that study with the nurses, that's really something. When asked to remember the important cues in patient cases, they left out key information, stuff that was later revealed through more careful questioning. And some of those cues, get this, they weren't even officially documented in medical textbooks at the time.
Really?
Yeah, that shows you just how much knowledge experts have that they don't even realize they have.
It's like they're operating on instinct.
Exactly.
Amazing. Okay, so experts aren't always the best at explaining themselves. What does that mean for learning and teaching? The paper wraps up by looking at how effective instruction is when it comes from experts just talking off the top of their heads versus using more structured methods to get at their knowledge.
Yeah, and the findings here are pretty significant. Even though this is still a developing area of research, the studies that have been done are pretty consistent. When you use structured techniques to get at expert knowledge, the instruction that comes out of that is way more effective than just having experts explain things in their own words. It's like you need to dig a little deeper to get to the good stuff. Like that surgery instruction study, the lecture, based on a detailed analysis of the expert's thinking, led to much better test scores, and more importantly, it actually improved how well the students performed on real patients. That's a big deal.
Huge difference.
And those studies on radar systems and spreadsheets showed the same thing. The structured approach led to way better performance than just watching an expert or trying to figure things out on your own.
So the key takeaway here is that if you're trying to learn something complex, asking an expert, how do you do it, might not be enough.
Right. There's a better way.
There's real value in using those structured methods to get at the hidden knowledge, stuff they might not even realize they know.
Yeah, you've got to unearth those hidden gems.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive today. Experts, they've got these super efficient cognitive systems. They've got tons of organized knowledge, refined strategies that enhance working memory, and a lot of those skills are highly automated. But those same things that make them so good at what they do can also make it hard for them to accurately explain what's going on in their heads.
Right.
And if you're just relying on their off-the-cuff explanations, you might miss some crucial stuff. But using those structured techniques, that's where the real magic happens. That's how you unlock that deeper knowledge and make learning more effective.
And this brings up a really interesting question for all of us. If even the best of the best sometimes struggle to explain their own brilliance, what does that mean for how we approach learning and teaching in general? Maybe the real skill in teaching isn't just about mastering the subject, but about bridging that gap between expert intuition and how a beginner sees the world. Figuring out how to get that expert knowledge out in the open where everyone can learn from it.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what we might be missing out on, just because we haven't figured out the best way to tap into that deep well of expert knowledge.
Absolutely.
So as you're learning new things, think about what automatic processes you might be taking for granted. And if you're teaching others, how can you get better at sharing your knowledge? What can you do to make that implicit knowledge explicit?
Great questions to think about.
So much to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure.